Senator Rhiannon.
Thank you, Acting Deputy President. Today I will revisit the Greens Voice for Animals Independent Office for Animal Welfare Bill. We first introduced this into 2015. We've taken the call for an independent office of animal welfare to a number of elections. The Greens are very passionate about the issue of animal welfare and animal rights. And in Australia, the need for this office has really becoming more pressing. You really need to go back to 2013 to look at some of the developments then, when there was a real wind-back on animal welfare issues. And this was a huge setback because at the time there was a number of bodies in place that allowed at a federal level for the consideration to be given to the protection of animals. There was advisory bodies that did actually exist, but then it was under the Abbott government that all that was removed. So it was actually a messy structure, but there was means for stakeholders to come forward at the federal level and to be able to have some input. But these structures, these bodies, went. And so then, since 2013, there's been no way for stakeholders to engage with industry, for there to be some cross-fertilisation of ideas, for people to raise their concerns. Now that's very serious, and from 2013, because of that shocking step backwards, many animal organisations, Animals Australia, Voiceless, many others, raised a voice very strongly calling on political parties to come forward with an independent Office of Animal Welfare. And I emphasise that word independent because that really is what's critical here, and we understand that in terms of how governments work, that they can set up such bodies. So what we were left with was that Labor Party did move on an Office of Animal Welfare, but not independent. And I'll come to this in more detail, but I just want to give some framework to how this has played out in recent years. Sadly, what they did was say that, well, the Office of Animal Welfare, yes, it's needed, but it'll go in under the Department of Agriculture. Totally inappropriate. This is where there's a huge conflict of interest, with the Department of Agriculture having failed in so many areas for so long to adequately ensure that animals aren't exploited, they don't suffer, they're not abused in terms of how they're used in various production processes. So that's been a very big issue in how we've approached the urgent need for this office to be established. And we do need to really ask ourselves, how many animals must suffer cruel and tortuous conditions in terms of how they live and how they die? How can it be that those charged with protecting animals from abuse are too often the ones who benefit most from it? And I do urge that senators, in considering this bill before them, give some thought to those important questions, because this office, Independent Office of Animal Welfare, is really, in the scheme of things, very mild. It's not about to change agriculture, it's not about to change how everything works when it comes to the use of animals in this country. But it allows the different people who are concerned about this to engage with government, to engage with industry. Because one thing I've found I'm fortunate to have this portfolio, and one thing that comes forward so often when I engage with this work is a range of people from such diverse parts of our society, politically, socially, where they work, who are deeply concerned about animal welfare, but they're frustrated in terms of how animals are handled in this society. They feel they have nowhere to turn. And the Office of Animal Welfare, that's independent at a federal level, is urgently needed to help people engage successfully and for us to get this national conversation going and get some strategies in place so we can ensure that the suffering of animals does not continue. So the essence of this bill is the establishment of a Commonwealth statutory authority. It would have responsibility for advising upon the protection of animal welfare in Commonwealth-regulated activities. And how does it go about that? It would establish this Office of Animal Welfare, and it would be an independent statutory authority. It would have a CEO, and that person's functions would include review and monitoring of live export standards and the Exporter Supply Chain Assurance System, known as SCAS. Now, SCAS alone really shows why this office is needed. It was set up apparently to ensure that the suffering that we have seen so graphically many times on our TV screens when animals are exported overseas, would not continue. But SCAS has been a failure. We're told it works, but so often we see the proof in a very graphic way that that's not the case. This office would also report on animal welfare issues that impact the Commonwealth, and it would report on the work of animal welfare committees and review animal welfare laws and policy that impacts on the Commonwealth. So again, that's where I wanted to give the emphasis. We'll probably hear some speeches in this debate that gets all outraged about what Greens and animal groups have said about live exports and try to end cruel cosmetics. And I acknowledge the interjections that have already started from the Nationals. But what we have is a bill that is something that we could all unite around. We could all unite around it because it's about bringing forward adequate processes, because surely nobody wants animals to suffer in terms of when we're using them in various production processes. And that's all it does, uses various means through this statutory body. Now, just to outline about the work of the CEO, they will report to the minister. They can put forward recommendations to the minister, and those recommendations and their reports need to be tabled in this parliament. And the minister will be required to respond to those recommendations. So it's not just a fancy little body that sits there and sounds good. It actually has follow through. We can scrutinise it. We as parliamentarians can scrutinise it, and the public can be fully aware of what's going on. So, as I said, the bill is an opportunity for Labor and the Coalition to really show that they are committed to working in a collaborative way to establish an independent Office of Animal Welfare that has the power to actually bring forward strategies, talk with those involved with animals in all sectors of different industries, so we can lift our standards in this country. This is something that is happening in many other countries, where they're starting to recognise that in the 21st century we need to be a country that shows that we do care about animals. We do understand that they have rights and that we have a responsibility to promote their welfare, and with an independent office we can achieve that. So, as I said, Labor, as I said in my opening remarks, Labor have come forward with the policy of an Office of Animal Welfare, but for various reasons, it sounds like they're trying to walk down the middle of the road again, trying to have a voice to those who are in animal groups and are agitating around this issue. Well, we've come forward with the office, but then because they're keeping it under the Department of Agriculture, it effectively is sending a signal to certain sectors of the industry, particularly the big agribusinesses. Well, nothing really has changed. Again, we know if you walk down the middle of the road, you're going to get run over. And Labor really should be showing some leadership on this, working with those people who are advocating for an independent Office of Animal Welfare. Because they're saying they want one, but why put it in the Department of Agriculture? It's not the way to proceed. And again, happy to acknowledge the interjections coming from both sides of the parliament. So in 2012, I understand, the Federal Parliamentary Labor Party caucus endorsed the Live Animal Export Working Group of caucus to develop a model for the Office of Animal Welfare. And I understand it reported back to the Labor Agriculture Minister in 2013. So they've been working on this for 6 years, which again, I commend them for that. But so it seemed to be going somewhere, but then you see that things start to slip. And because what happens is that the Labor Minister of Agriculture, when Greens questioned them about the office, they said there is work to be done in this area, but the primary responsibility for animal welfare issues does remain with the state and territories. And I've got to say that when I heard those words coming from Labor, it was a real worry, because they're weasel words. That's sort of like Polly speak to not wanting to get caught out, but in fact these days people are cluey and they can see what's going on there. You're not wanting to say we're not going to deliver on an independent Office of Animal Welfare, and so you try and get out of it by passing the buck. Now, I'm not letting the coalition off the hook. We're about to hear from Senator O'Sullivan, so they'll give a big, he'll give a big blast to this whole idea from going on previous track records, and so that's deeply appalling. But it's a reminder where Labor should have some backbone on this, give some leadership, because you can't just talk about an Office of Animal Welfare thinking that'll get you through the next election and you'll have some talking points around it. You have to be serious about it and make it independent. So the bill that we have before us does allow a constitutionally valid federal response to animal cruelty issues that tragically continue to occur at an alarming rate in Australia. What it actually does, and this is where the coalition should actually wake up to themselves, it actually reinstates the coalition government's dissolved animal welfare strategy and its advisory group, and it would begin the long but so easily doable road to protecting animals in this country. So again, I think it's worth us reminding ourselves why this office is needed. This is where we do actually need to think of the animals involved, like the suffering of animals, the poultry hens, dairy cows, beef cows. The list goes on and on, sadly, and it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be like that. And again, always happy to take your interjections, Senator O'Sullivan, because you expose yourself where you're coming from. Now, this Export Supply Chain Assurance scheme, the SCAS, just let's remind ourselves the depth of the failure here. I imagine most, if not all of us, have seen the harrowing images. Cattle cowering, slowly dying under the blows of sledgehammers, their throats sawn agape, eyes gouged, tendons slashed, sheep kicked, trusses together, thrown on the tops of car roofs, thrown in the back of boots when it's baking hot, suffering an appalling death. That's how it's been for too long. These are the things that we should be dealing with and working how they can end them. Not coming up with an SCAS scheme that is really nothing more than a PR exercise, so when the exporters are caught out again, the government can get out there and say, we've got rules, we'll have to investigate why they were broken, but they've broken Australian rules. We know now that that's absolutely ridiculous. How can you control animal welfare from behind a desk in Canberra? It's not possible. Different countries have different rules, and when just on the issue of live exports, this is where, and I can never understand why Labor go along with live exports. We know why Liberals and Nationals do, because they're locked on to the rich pastoralists. But let's remember all those pastoralists, happy to take your injections, and you'll have a time. But all those pastoralists involved in the live export trade, none of them solely rely on live exports. And where this country, regional Australia, and this is where these Nationals are such a sellout to regional Australia, where these Nationals are such a sellout to regional Australia, is that if we built the abattoirs, got the infrastructure in place so there was all-weather roads leading to those abattoirs, we could create tens of thousands of jobs in regional Australia. And again, they voted today. We had a motion in this parliament today about live exports. Again, Liberal, Labor, Nationals all voting against it. The Greens and Darren Hinch standing up for what should be a win-win. A win-win in terms of shifting away, transitioning away from live exports to developing the chilled box meat in Australia. And we do that. And in doing that, we would create these thousands of jobs. You won't get up there and beat up on the Greens about jobs. When we recognise that an industry is in transition, we have a jobs plan. And this is certainly one where we've worked with the Meat Employers Union, worked with animal welfare groups, recognising that this is where something can be achieved for animals, for regional Australia, for jobs, bringing back dignity to people who, in many places, for generations, they haven't had work because of the way because of policies that come from Liberal Labor and National. So when we've seen that vision, Australians were rightly outraged. And I think it's just worth revisiting what happened was in May 2011 when we saw the first very graphic vision of the live export trade. The Gillard government was in office and they did listen to public opinion. They suspended the trade. They did the right thing. But rather than hold on to the decision that they had made, they just weakened. They gave it away. They didn't look to the future in terms of transitioning out of the live export trade to the box-chilled meat trade in Australia, where we clearly would be able to develop it in a way that the suffering of the animals was drastically reduced, we promoted the jobs, and we boosted the economy of Australia. So a win-win-win, like a fantastic plan, a plan that still should be adopted, and one day I'm sure it would be. But we ended up with the shocking decision for the animals and also for regional Australia and the economy because Labor went weak there. Now, the Australian Meat Industry Employees Union has identified that 40,000 jobs were lost due to the live export trade over a number of decades. And independent research also shows that livestock processed in Australia are worth more to the economy. In the case of sheep, 20% more. Oh, look, yeah, OK, so we'll take that's a great interjection. Thank you. I mean, it shows you how ignorant the Senator O'Sullivan is about this. He thinks he's been smart and says who's going to eat it. You're the ones who's telling us about how the world wants to eat Australian meat. The box-chilled meat export trade is expanding around the world, and Australia is missing out on it because of the failure of successive governments to get behind it. That's a failure. What a silly question. Who's going to eat it? It's about the export trade, and that's. I mean, surely you must have examined it. But again, it's just that you're locked on to a few pastoralists, and also that you're just obsessed about the whole issue. So it is clear that trying to reform and regulate the live export industry has clearly failed. And again, this gives further weight to the Greens' call for an independent Office of Animal Welfare. Now, I acknowledge we're not going to solve this issue overnight, but we need to look at a strategy of what works best for this country, and that country includes the people, it includes consideration of their jobs and consideration of animal welfare. Now, the office would be integral to the welfare of animals across Australia. The committee that is part of what we would be setting up with this bill, along with the CEO, will consist of scientists, consumer groups, non-governmental animal welfare groups, the department and commercial producers, purchasers of animals and animal products. Now, these stakeholders collectively would have a seat at the table together, and that would allow for reasonable, at times it obviously would be challenging, but you could have a balanced debate surrounding animal welfare and animal rights. And that really is the direction that we need to be taking for so many reasons. We've still got before us, it fell over at the end of the last year, trying to deal with cruel cosmetics. It looked like the government, the Liberal National Government, was running a bit of a scam on that one, and we need to get back to that so we do actually stop cosmetics and ingredients for cosmetics coming into this country that have been tested on animals. Then there's the issue of the management of our poultry, both for hen laying and for eating poultry, eating chicken. So too many areas there is extreme cruelty continuing, and something needs to be done about this, because right now the situation is leaving Australia very vulnerable. Like, we've seen reports of dairy cows having their calves removed moments after birth as surplus to requirements, hens in artificially lit sheds, overcrowded cages where they're constantly standing on sloping wide floors, never able to rest their legs, mother pigs confined to pens too small. There's so many reasons why an Office of Animal Welfare is urgently needed, an office that's independent, that works with all stakeholders and that can ensure that our economy develops in a proper way.
Senator O'Sullivan.